afternoon. I see our attendees have started to sign in. We are just going to allow a few moments for the rest of the attendees to join. While we do that, for those of you online, if you would like to make use of the chat function, just pop us a message, let us know who you are and where you are signing in from today. So good afternoon, everyone. If you have just signed in, a warm welcome. We are allowing a few moments. Please let us know using the chat function who you are and where you are from. I see we have Andre Harrison from Cape Town. Welcome and thank you for signing in today. We have Juanita Cup from the Eastern Cape. Thank you for signing in. Welcome, everyone. We are just allowing a moment for the participants to sign in. Please make use of the chat function. Just pop us a message with your name and where you're calling in from today. We have Ali from University of Western Cape, Leon Roots from UNISA, Lorna from KwaZulu-Natal, Brenda, I think I've missed where you're from, UNISA as well, welcome. Ellen Lombard from UNISA, Mahau from Potchefstroom, we have Njabulu from Free State, Victoria from Pretoria, Naomi from Johannesburg. Welcome, everyone. Anna from TET, Mlugesi from UKZN. We have Annie. Annie from Sweden is back. Welcome. Thanks for joining in on our 4th session today. Erica from UNISA, and we have quite a few UNISA representatives today as well. It looks like we are almost ready to begin. With that, I'm going to hand over to Pastor Juanita Cup.
Thank you, Natasha. Welcome to all the attendees today, to the presenters and the panelists. We are very happy to have you here at our 4th session, the discussion on deconstructing gender norms and the roles within gender-based violence within the African context. We look forward to unpacking this topic today. Just to welcome you from Golden Key, Southern Africa, I just have a few comments, and just to open this session, I just want to mention that it has become increasingly clear that the world is in need of an intervention. And if we look at the statistics, especially what we've seen in the first 3 sessions with regards to gender-based violence, not only in our country, South Africa, where it's 5.1 times higher than the rest of the world, we notice that it's also a very imminent problem globally. We thank you for our attendees from Sweden and Ghana also joining us, and we hope that this importation of knowledge will also spread out to the globe and that we will really bring awareness. It's become clear that we need an intervention, but before we can get to an interventive platform, we have to raise awareness. And it's for this reason that Golden Key Southern Africa, together with the collaborative partners, UNISA, SAfAIDS, Vitality Wellness, and Father and Nation, gave birth to this webinar series on gender-based violence. So this webinar series is not only focused on bringing awareness, we want to make the truth known on what gender-based violence is and the effect that it has on our women and our children and victims at large. It's also here to facilitate a platform for victims to reach out. It's a platform for learning and education, a platform to facilitate solution finding. And in the next few sessions, we will be discussing core concepts. We will be discussing action plans. We will be discussing contact information for victims who are not sure how to get out of that evil cycle that they are encapsulated in. And therefore, from the Golden Key Southern Africa head office, our 3 pillars are academics, leadership, and service. Academics. This webinar series will bring awareness. This webinar series will touch the lives of many a student. It will bring about learning and education on the topic of gender-based violence. But more than that, we will start to bring awareness. When we look at the second pillar, leadership, as an honor society, we want to lead the way with our collaborative partners to bring an active change, to instill new values, to rebuild, to reconstruct, to reform, and then service. Our final pillar, as the Golden Key International Honor Society, we stand in service of our community. We stand to assist those who cannot stand for themselves. We stand to minister to those who cannot speak up. And we want to give a voice to those who've had to keep silent as victims of gender-based violence. It is my pleasure from the Golden Key International Honor Society Head Office in South Africa to welcome you to this wonderful session, session 4. And the topic is deconstructing gender norms and roles within gender-based violence within the African context. I will now be handing over to Leon Roots from UNISA. I just want to read his biography and he will do a short introduction for us from UNISA and also hand over to our MC Lizette Leroux. Leon Roots is the program convener of the postgraduate program of Social and Behavioral Studies, HIV/AIDS, within the Department of Sociology. He's also the program manager of Teresano Collaborative Projects, focusing on the advocacy of diversity, equity, belonging and inclusion in communities, curriculum and workplaces. Currently, he's the convener of the university's Employee Health and Wellness Working Group and has been involved in this field in various sectors over years, including the development of workplace policy and program frameworks. His MA focused on pathways to manhood, while he's currently working on his PhD, which will present some guidelines on how to implement male-friendly employee health and wellness work programs. He also served as the chairperson of SAfAIDS South Africa between 2015 until 2020 and provided strategic advice and support to different organizations in both the public and private sector on HIV, health and wellness. And so we want to welcome Leon Roots and all our other collaborative partners, UNISA, SAfAIDS, Father and Nation, Vitality Wellness. We want to welcome you to this platform today. Thank you for joining us. I hand over to you, Leon. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and very welcome on this beautiful day. We are hoping for some rain here in the north, that we can also celebrate our spring. We had a bit of a cold front and we were thinking, oh my goodness, we just left winter, now winter's coming back again. But hopefully it is a sign that the weather is changing and it's bringing this hopeful rain that it reminds us what is life all about. So on behalf of UNISA, very, very welcome here, and I'm very impressed with the people who are today in this seminar, webinar, as we call it now, online. And it shows a very high level of interest from different people, from different structures. And that is what we aim to. We aim to really have a full engagement on these different topics as we start to unpack this phenomenon called gender-based violence. So Teresano stands for Working Together in Tswana. So that's what it's all about. We are working together to find together solutions. And that's why we come to platforms like this, so that we can learn and share with each other, but we can also find solutions together. And that is, we are very grateful for the Golden Key South Africa to join hands with us to make this work and to have this impact in your life. And we're very excited with all the other collaborative partners who are part of our team. And we're looking forward for this series to continue. Please make sure you look at the forthcoming ones, and we are looking forward to see you as we go along. And once again, very welcome. University of South Africa welcomes you. Rela Boga. Thank you. So let me introduce you to our MC of the day. So the MC of today is Ms. Lizette Leroux. And I like what she does. She starts her bio with a personal note. She puts it out there that she's a single mother of a daughter. She's a sister of a family. She's a daughter of parents, and she's a friend, and she's a compassionate person who are very much alive and doing things that she loves to do. And she is also a person living with a disability. She's passionate about her work as the manager in our university as director of student development, social development, sorry, and have really contributed quite a lot to this topic that we're busy unpacking here. She has been acting in many spaces, including our as acting director of our Student with Disability unit here at UNISA, as well as she's the project leader of a current grant on spearheading our student peer education program around student health and wellness and community mobilization. She worked also as a social worker for many years as in child welfare Tshwane, focusing on child abuse and family therapy. She has trained many spaces and worked with pedophilia and also sexual offenders, where she investigated, were part of investigated a team who work with courts to actually work before sentencing. She's part of the current investigation team that started the special court system for students who testify in these cases, including the requirement that most of them would be done in camera. She's also busy looking over the 20 years that she's been involved in this area on cases of sexual harassment, including with students and colleagues sometimes, and even in the communities. She has played a big role in victim empowerment and focusing on awareness raising around gender-based violence, including both for survivors and perpetrators. She delivered several papers on different topics related to this gender-based violence over the last few years and has become quite a well-known speaker in this space. She has also played a role in the sense that she contributed that the mining sector opened its space for women and specifically open cast mining environmental spaces where she advocate and enhance the capacity of women in that space. Lastly, she is doing also leadership capacity at the Desmond Tutu Diversity Trust as a trustee and also as a deputy president of NAHAVU at the previous old Technikon South Africa. So thank you so much, Lizette. I hand over to you to manage the program for us.
Thank you, Leon, and welcome to everybody that's attending the seminar. It's quite humbling for us to know that people are interested in the work, but not only interested, also have a lot of contributions to make. In our reflections on the first three seminars, we actually talked about that we want to see more participation from our participants. So we decided just to introduce a few guidelines with the request that we also want to learn from you. And I think when you work in the GBV space, one thing stands out, that we always need to remain in a learning posture. And everybody has a bit of the solution, whether you are a victim, whether you are professional in the field, whether you are academic in the field, whether you support people in the field. We all need to learn from each other. So as we going to introduce our speakers for the day, I want to invite you to also participate, not only in the chat room, but that at the end, your contribution will create the knowledge that will be shared today, not only from the speakers, they're the catalysts. Often with GBV work, there's a central point where we must start. And in the previous seminars and in our own experiences of working, the socialization process starts with the gender roles that we all learn. And often the unlearning of sexist behavior or patterns of gender-based violence start with that. And we're very honored to have a number of experts with us today that will share with us their engagement in the field, but also the knowledge that they build up over time. So I'm honored to introduce to you Craig Wilkinson. And it's wonderful to engage with a summary of Craig's bio and realize the depth and commitment that he have to work in the field. And as we unpack this, it's also like peeling an onion. We need to work layer by layer, but most importantly, we need to work with men, because for a long time, our focus was only maybe on the victims, but the changed behavioral patterns and the changed communities and society values will come when we join hands with working with men. So Craig is a best-selling South African author, award-winning social entrepreneur. He's a sought-after speaker, so we're very honored to have him here, and a dad coach. Also, given the statistics that most South African children grow up without their dads, this makes this person so important in this conversation. He's passionate about the crucial role men and fathers play in the lives of their children and society. As a keynote speaker and as a facilitator, Craig covers a variety of topics in the area of authentic masculinity, parenting, GBV, gender equity, and excellence. Drawing from his experience as a single dad, raising 2 children to adulthood, and years of working with men, Craig has produced outstanding resources for fathers at all stages of their fatherhood journey. The book Dad is a rich source of wisdom, skills, tips, and advice for fathers of children of all ages. And with that, we welcome Craig to the podium, to the platform, I must say.
Thank you very much, Lizette, and as ever, wonderful to be here. Always great to meet with like-minded people and like-hearted people who are just so passionate about building a safer, better future. I just want to start off by saying that, President Cyril Ramaphosa not long ago said that gender-based violence is a human rights issue. And it's so important in these discussions around gender-based violence and gender issues and racial issues and all this, that we always focus back to our humanity. Our primary identity is human being. And I think often in these discussions around historical imbalances and injustices and current, we can polarize, and we tend to go towards an either-or scenario as opposed to a both-and scenario. Our primary identity is human being. Before I'm a man, I'm a human being. Before I'm a Christian, I'm a human being. Before any sort of sexual orientation, any other form of identity, I'm a human being. And I think we come together as human beings with the acknowledgement that any form of abuse, no matter how it's couched and no matter what form it takes, is a human rights issue. And we come as equally valuable human beings, primarily as our identity. The issue of masculinity, and in South Africa, we have a real, and in fact globally, we have a real challenge with men at the moment, in the sense that there's been a lot of demonization of masculinity as per se. Often when dealing with issues, we tend to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And so masculinity per se has been attacked and demonized. In a recent survey in the UK, men of all ages were asked the question, is masculinity a good thing or a bad thing? Is it a positive thing or a negative thing? And in the age category, 18 to 24-year-old men, young men, 42% said that masculinity is a negative thing. And for me, that's an absolute catastrophe. If I believe that I'm bad simply because I'm a man, we're in for a lot of trouble. Someone who believes they're bad intrinsically because of who they are, because of something that they are unable to change, we have a real problem, and we need to fix and restore that. In many ways, I don't believe, and this may be a controversial statement, that we need to reinvent masculinity. I believe we need to rediscover it, rediscover the essence of what it means to be a man. And essentially, any form of power is given only to love, to serve, to honor, to protect, to provide, to create safety. That's what strength is for. And any form of masculine strength, no matter what form it takes, is given for that purpose alone. And it's only when that is misused that we have a problem. And we talked last time about why does abuse happen? And I mentioned the 4 major reasons why I believe men abuse, because no man is born an abuser. Masculinity per se is not abusive in any way. It's designed to be protective and loving and caring and giving and to serve. And the 4 reasons I believe that men do abuse is wounded masculinity, a false concept of what it means to be a man, a false concept of the relative value of male and female, which are of equal value. In many ways different, mostly the same, many ways different drivers, but of equal value. And false concepts about the relative value of male and female is what drives a lot of gender-based violence. And the 4th reason was emasculating circumstances. And we're not going to go into that today. That's something we covered last time. But we do have a free online resource for anyone who wants to delve into that, which I'll share later. But today I want to really just touch on what does it mean to be a man? What is masculinity? What is good masculinity? I wrote a little booklet and produced an online course called the 6-pack of masculine virtues, playing on the 6-pack on the abdomen, the 6-pack that we can drink of beers, but far more important there, what are the 6 virtues that make a man a good man? That talks about good, positive, healthy, powerfully positive masculinity, which is what masculinity is supposed to be. Masculinity is not toxic. Masculinity is not trash. Masculinity is a beautiful, beautiful gift to the world, just as femininity is. And as we as men and women come together to co-create a beautiful future, that's what it's all about. It's not a gender war, it's a gender dance. So I'm going to briefly touch on the 6 virtues, which I believe make a man a good man. Again, this is a weekend seminar condensed into 10 or 15 minutes. Forgive me if I rush, but again, there's a free online course for anyone who wants to delve deep into this. The first virtue of authentic, true, positive, healthy masculinity, the way men are supposed to be, is that masculinity uses its strength for good. You see, there are 3 ways in which a man can use his strength. He can fail to use it, he can misuse it, or he can use it for good. Too many men today fail to use their strength. We all know the famous saying that all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to be silent. And men are not designed to be silent. I saw a wonderful commentary on this recently, which is the opposite of masculine is not feminine. The masculine and feminine are complementary. They're not opposite in any way. The opposite of masculinity is passivity, because men are not designed to be passive. We're not meant to be passive. We're not meant to be silent in the face of evil. We're not meant to shirk responsibilities. And so many men, and particularly men who grew up wounded, shirk responsibility. And we escape into all kinds of addictions. Often a man, instead of being with his family or present, is on the golf course or in the pub or with a bunch of mates. And not that there's anything wrong with those things, but the balance is wrong. And when men fail to step up, when they fail to take responsibility, when they withdraw into all kinds of addictions, and these could be so-called legitimate escapes, like workaholism. Workaholism has been actually lauded in Western society. You can say proudly, I work a 60-day week, and people think that you're great. But are you? It's an addiction. It's an escape. It's shirking responsibilities to family, to loved ones, to children, to partners, and often men escape. So there are legitimate escapes. There are also illicit ones. Pornography has become an international epidemic. So many men withdraw into their private dark space and spend hours watching pornography. That's an absolute escape. It's an abdication of utilizing a man's strength in the correct way to love and to serve and to romance and to be the kind of partner his partner needs him to be. Drinking. A lot of people socially drink, but often it becomes more than that. Sports can be an escape. Excessive anything is an escape from stepping up and utilizing your strength in the way it was designed to be. So passivity, failure to step up, failure to use strength, and the wasting of one's strength in all kinds of pursuits that are negative is the first way a lot of men. In South Africa, we have a fatherlessness issue, which I believe is that and unemployment, for me, are the 2 single biggest issues facing our country. Fatherlessness. Most families have a mom present, a granny, an older sister, but so many have no fathers. And that's an abdication of responsibility. It's a running away. It's a failure to use strength. The second way is to misuse strength. And so many men do this. They misuse their strength because they feel like they need to dominate. They need to be in control. They need to take what's not theirs. They need to use their strength to take, dominate, control, always be right in order to be a man. And it's a total misconception of what masculinity is. And that's where we see all the full range and spectrum of gender-based violence, from a man who's never able to say, I'm sorry, from a man who's never able to be wrong, from a man who can never do the housework, a man who can never serve, to a man who physically or emotionally or sexually abuses his partner or other people. Misuse of strength. It's not what men are designed to do. The only way for a man to be truly authentically male is for him to use his strength well. And true strength is used to serve. You think about politicians. We vote politicians into power so that they can serve their constitution. We call politicians and anyone in government service, we call them public servants. They're there to serve the public. And masculine strength, any power, is a sacred responsibility given to us to serve. So masculinity in its true form serves, loves, honors, protects, provides. UNISA, you are a pastor, and we have somewhat of a spiritual and religious context. And I just love the story of Jesus Christ, who, you know, in the Christian narrative is the most powerful being on earth. And what does he do with that power? He gets on his knees and he washes his disciples' feet. He serves. And so masculine strength is given to serve. And that's the only true, authentic way to be a man. We do not judge how much of a man is by the strength that he has. We judge how much of a man is by what he does with the strength and the power he has. And that can be economic, it can be physical, it can be positional, it can be emotional, psychological. In any relationship we have power. We've been given the sacred right of having an influence on the other person's life. What we do with that strength, that power, that privilege, that position, that's what determines whether we're a man or not. And so that's the first quality, and I've spent a bit of time on that, is true masculinity uses its strength for good. Love, serve, honor, protect, provide. The second quality is he tends his fields. And I'm using the agricultural example. You see, every man has a field, just as every woman has a field, but we're talking about men. And in that field is everything that is being entrusted to him, everything that's in his sphere of influence, everything that he's responsible for. And that includes his family and his loved ones and his roles and responsibilities and duties. It includes himself as a man. And there are four key areas of responsibility that every man has. Number one is himself. You know, if you use the agricultural example, a farmer needs to tend his fields. He needs to look after his cattle and his sheep, and he looks after the field and the mealies, and he cannot do that if he himself is not healthy. And us as men, the first thing we need to look after is our own health, our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health, because we're important, we matter. A father matters deeply to his children. And if he looks after his health, mental, physical, spiritual, he's able to be the kind of father that his children need. His partner needs him. His colleagues need him. The world needs him. He has a purpose to fulfill that needs him to be okay. And as men, we need to do that. You know, the research shows that men are less than half as likely to seek for medical help than women are. And it's such a tragedy because there's a sense of ego. I've got it together. I don't need help. But we need to look after ourselves. Number two, we need to look after the people in our lives. Every human being that is in our sphere of influence and care, we need to make sure that they are nourished and cared for and looked after, and that we give them our best. We need to look after our material goods. What kind of a steward are we over our material goods, our finances, our investments? And fourthly, we need to look after our roles and responsibilities. Every man has roles and responsibilities: father, son, brother, colleague, friend, husband. And how well we tend our fields, how well we fulfill our responsibilities and duties and roles determines the kind of man that we are. So the number two virtue of authentic masculinity is he tends his fields, and he tends them well. The number three quality is he judges himself and values himself and assesses himself by his character and not by his possessions, by what's inside, what's not on the outside. So many men grow up, and we grow up in a world which has many lies about what it means to be a man. And the four biggest lies, and I won't unpack them in detail, but sex, power, money, and big boys don't cry. Don't we all hear that growing up as a man? The more sexual prowess you have, the more of a man you are. The more money you have, the bigger the car you drive, the bigger job, the more of a man you are. The more power you have, whether it's physical, emotional, political, whatever, the more of a man you are. What incredible lies. What incredible lies. The truth is, a man who's committed and faithful and loyal to one partner, that's authentic masculinity, not someone who can play the field. The truth is, the poorest man can leave behind the richest legacy, because it's not what you leave for somebody, it's what you leave in somebody that counts the most. Power is nothing unless you use it well. Power doesn't define you as a man. We saw some of the greatest men in history, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela. They had no power, they had no money, they were jailed, they made vows of poverty, and they became powerful men. Why? Because they influenced the world for good. And the fourth lie is big boys don't cry. You know, men often grow up thinking that to be vulnerable is to be weak, and the opposite is true. It takes much more courage to be vulnerable than it takes to lie about, hey, I'm okay, when you're not okay. So how we judge and assess ourselves as men is crucial, and true masculinity judges itself by what's inside, not the size of your biceps or your bank balance, but by the size of your heart and your character and your compassion and your care and your influence on other people. The fourth characteristic, and I do apologize for going through these very quickly, we could spend an hour at least on each, is that he builds a band of brothers. Research around the world shows that men are lonely. Men have friends we can drink beer with, and we can watch a football match or soccer match or rugby match, but we don't often have friends that we can really share deeply our lives with, that we can hold each other accountable, that we can walk shoulder to shoulder as brothers in tackling life. And true masculinity realizes that it can never do what it's designed and called to do alone, that we need brothers around us. We need a band of brothers. And we talk about 4 things that men need to do to build a band of brothers. The first is to honor each other as men. You know, men, we're very famous and very good at ripping each other off. You know, the love language of men is different often to the love language of women. We tease each other, we rip each other off, and yet we don't honor each other. And we need to learn to really see the good in each other and say, brother, I really admire and love and respect the way that you are faithful, committed, loyal to your wife and love your children. You know, we need to see these qualities and call them out and honor each other as brothers. And when we do that, powerful things begin to happen. We do this a lot on retreats and camps, and a lot of the talks I do, we get men to honor each other, and it's beautiful what happens. Often it results in tears, men crying for the first time in many years. We need to hold each other accountable, sharpen each other. There's a biblical verse that says, iron sharpens iron, and as men get together, we sharpen each other. If I see my brother stepping out of line, I tell him. If he sees me stepping out of line, he tells me. And we sharpen, we help each other to be our best by calling each other's blind spots out. And that's a lot of gender-based violence, you know, men joking, catcalling. You know, as men, we need to call that out in each other. Say, hey, brother, that's not cool behavior. We need to be vulnerable with each other. A lot of men commit suicide on average 4 times more than women. And one of the reasons that we don't share with each other, we don't share our burdens and carry them together. And fourthly, we need to stand for each other. We need to be there for each other, not just to have fun together, have a beer together, tell jokes, but to be there when the chips are down, when things are tough. The fifth and second last quality or virtue of authentic masculinity is he mentors the next generation. He mentors the next generation. There's a lovely story about a British man who used to come home from work every day, put his briefcase down, and then go to the pub on the corner of his street. This was his habit, his routine. And then one day he was sitting in the pub having his favorite beer, sitting on his favorite bar stool, and he felt a tugging at his elbow. He looked down, and there was his 5-year-old son. And he said to his son, son, how did you find me? And the son looked up at him and said, Dad, it was easy. I just followed your footprints in the snow. And the man had an aha moment. He realized that he's leaving footprints, and someone's following those footprints. And every man who's an authentic man realizes, I have the responsibility of living a life that's worth copying, of setting the example for younger men and women in my community. So many men who are abusive grew up in a household where abuse was the norm, where the father modeled the wrong kind of behavior for his son. And the sons looked to older men, boys looked to older men to model masculinity to them. And so often what they perceive as virtues are actually vices. They copy men's virtues, vices, thinking they're virtues, and they learn the wrong behavior. And every man worth his salt says, I'm going to live a life that's worth copying. I'm going to impart to the next generation what it means to be authentically male, and that's a good man. The final virtue is that every true man desires and works hard at making the world a better place. You see, if masculinity is a gift to humanity, just as femininity is, every man needs to say, the world needs to be a better place because I'm in it. We can judge that by how our partners feel. You know, is my wife flourishing and thriving? Does she feel nourished and cared for and empowered and released to be everything she can be? Or is she downcast and burdened? My children, are they better off because I'm in their life? My colleagues, my friends, the world, my community, my country, is it better off because I'm in it? And to do that as men, we need to vow two things. Number one is to give more than we take. Give more than we take. We need to serve more than we be served. We need to be people who seek to say, well, what can I give? And that starts an upward spiral. The more that you give and sow into the world, the more the world gives back to you. And you become more powerful for the sole reason of being able to give more. And it's a beautiful thing. We all know people who are takers. You know, these are the friends who come around, they empty your fridge, they drink your beer, they watch your TV, they mess your house, they leave, and your house is worse off than when they arrive. Friends who borrow a car and the car comes back dirty and with less petrol. But you get the kind of guys that would borrow your car and the car comes back spanking clean and it comes back with a full tank. That's someone who gives more than he takes. And men, we need to be committed to giving more than we take, to making the world a better place. And the second thing we need to do is to find and fulfill our purpose, realize our potential to the full. Every one of us has a unique gift, unique skills and talents and abilities and desires and passions that we are designed to give to the world. And we need to find that, fulfill it. And that's not to make more money. That's not to be more powerful. It's to how do we enhance and bless this world. So I'm going to leave on that note. That's the sixth virtue, make the world a better place. So we need to go back to the viewpoint that true masculinity is a beautiful gift to humanity. But what does it mean? It means these six virtues. And if every man lived by those, we would live in a very, very safe and good world and create a beautiful future together with our female counterparts, co-creating a wonderful future. So thank you for your time, and let me hand back to our facilitator.
Thank you so much, Craig. One of the brilliant psychoanalysts said that one needs to demystify concepts, that it becomes accessible to everybody. And as I scroll down the chat, it's amazing what input your presentation has solicited from our dear participants, and everybody feels this was a brilliant presentation. There's suggestions that this need to be taken to schools, given the six-pack model that you make accessible, not only for us at universities, but also on many levels in society. With that, we will also allow questions after the sessions, but we will introduce our next speaker now, and that is all the way from Harare. We have Edith. Now, Edith is a seasoned senior developer, a social scientist, a strategist with organizational track record, working with international organizations in Southern Africa and internationally. Edith is currently leading and managing a consultancy for Vitality Wellness in Zimbabwe, and has previously co-authored a book entitled Tales of Womanhood. And given also the presentation we had with Craig that focused a lot on masculinity, as one of the participants said in the chat box, it's a dance. It's not a war between genders, it's a dance between the two. So Edith is also an expert in promoting private sector sustainability, decent work and diversity management. Edith has a strong background in promoting women's economic empowerment, managing HIV/AIDS, wellness, advocacy, and policy processes. Edith is also a social entrepreneur with interest in empowering women and girls' rights. So Edith, with that, we're looking forward to you presenting the other side of this gender dance, that we can create a whole society in the acknowledgement and the positive gender roles that we need to have in this world of ours. So over to you, Edith. You are welcome to present your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here. And thank you to Craig for getting us started with this afternoon's discussion, where we are looking at deconstructing the gender norms, and the discussion so far that you've had on addressing toxic masculinities, wounded masculinities, and the virtues that people can start to use in their communities and in their spaces to start to make a difference. Where I want to pick up from, or to start with, is a reflective session. So for what we are going to do for the next couple of minutes, I would like all the participants to be fully engaged. And if you can work with me for this session, I would like us to just do an individual exercise, which is really reflective. And for the male participants, who are with us this afternoon, I want you to just think of an activity or something you would do if you are told to act like a woman. Act like a woman. What does that, what would you do if you were asked to act like a woman? That's to the men who are here this afternoon, and to the females who are here today. I want you to think of what you would do if someone says to you, act like a man, act like a man. I would like maybe after half a minute or so, if we can have volunteers, if we can have 3 females from the group on what comes to mind, or what they would do if they were told to role play and act like a man. And if we can also get 3 males who can volunteer to say what comes to mind if they are told to act like a female. Do we have any volunteers?
I think, Edith, people can also post in the chat. Then we can also read some of it if there's answers.
Yes, thank you, Lizette. You can also post in the chat. For the males, when you are, if someone says to you, act like a female, what would you do? What do you think women do? And for women, if you are told to act like a man, what is that to you? What does that look like? What would you, what activity or what engagement, what would you do?
Edith, we have a response here. If I assume if I were a woman, I will go to the bush and look for firewood. Another one is to act like a woman is to perform some activity that is laden with emotions, such as caring for a child or an individual that's ill. From a woman, act like a man, possess a sense of entitlement, superiority, and a fragile ego. That's from Ella. That's strong. As a man, I will be aggressive is another response. I will speak in a very commanding voice. That's also from a woman, acting like a man. I will be someone who's authoritative, who want to be listened to and not to be told what to do. And then as a man, I would ask my woman, why the food has no gravy? Act like a man, become dominant and controlling. I think you have a couple of responses there. I think women came forward a lot more in how they will act as men, but there was 1 or 2 responses from men that if they were women, they would do certain activities and have certain emotions.
Okay, thank you so much, Lizette, for reading out those responses in the chat. Then my next question for my participants is that I want to ask, have you ever been in a situation for the men where someone told you that you need to act like a man, and just for you to process what had happened and why did they say that to you and how did that make you feel? And for the women to ask yourselves the same, have you ever been in a situation where someone says to you, please act like a woman? What had you done? What had you said? And what did they say? And how did they make you feel? And when you look at all the responses, even the responses that have been given this afternoon, you see that society has attributed certain behaviors or certain activities or certain chores or things like that, to say these are maybe done by men and this should be done by women. You heard from the responses, the male colleagues felt that if they were women, maybe they would be fetching firewood, taking on nurturing roles, working with the children and being the caregiver and preparing food. And while being a man or acting as a man meant that you displayed dominant and controlling personalities and you would be authoritative and more in control. And I think one responded actually said you would be aggressive. What this tells us, and this is just revisiting the discussions that we've been having from the first session, is that how does society expect males and how does society expect females to act? What we know from the foregoing discussions and what we continue to talk about is that men and women, boys and girls, are not born with these characteristics or behaviors, but they actually learn them from the unspoken and spoken messages within our families, in our communities, in our churches and societies. So what we display in terms of how we act like a man or how we act like a woman is very much informed by our socialization and the norms, the cultural norms within our communities. That's what informs us. So if we were to adopt all the wonderful nuggets, for example, from Father and Nation, and we started training up children from a very young age and started redressing the current norms and cultures that we have and attitudes towards men or women, over time, we would have a change in what we view in terms of how the genders treat each other and how perhaps men are more revered and are given more power and autonomy in communities. So all that can change over time. So I just want for us to keep it in mind that this just speaks to the stereotypes that we have in our communities, in whether it's the workplace, at family level, and even within our churches. We have sort of put boxes to say, this is what we expect of women. Women should have feminine qualities. They should be soft-spoken. They should be caring. They should be nurturing. They are more emotional and more domestic. They are passive. They are gentle. They are mothers. They are caregivers. That's what we have said. That sums up who and what a woman is. And when we looked at masculinities, we've looked at the stereotype is being tough, providing, and being rational, thick-skinned, and even aggressive. So we've translated this even to, if you look even in tertiary institutions or in choice of careers, you see that this also follows through. You'll find that there are some careers, especially those that follow the STEM, the sciences, the technical fields. You find that there is very limited presence of women or girls in those sectors. Women have traditionally not been pursuing technical qualifications. They are not so much in engineering and not so much in mining and construction. And equally, if you look at the boy child, they are also not so much into nursing or the type of softer skills. And this is all has been informed by the stereotypes in the gendered roles in our communities of what is acceptable career choices and what is acceptable for men and for women. And these are the things that we need to change within our communities and in our thinking. So this exercise, you can do it with your friends and in your families. And it's quite interesting when you look at the results that always there are certain things that we attribute to say, this is feminine, this is masculine, but where does that come from? So the central message is that all these are learned behaviors. We have taught children this, and when you look at it, you then, if you unpack it further, you would ask yourself, who taught you everything in the discussion and in the boxes that you put above? And when people have questioned you perhaps in the past that you are not quite acting like a woman or you are not quite acting like a man, how has that made you feel? You find in our communities, even if there's been a death or a funeral, it's quite the thing that people don't expect men to cry. And often men are stopped from crying. And I was very glad to hear Craig say in his presentation that he's had sessions where men have actually cried for the first time in years. So they've so much also bottled emotions inside, and there is no outlet because society has said men don't cry. And we want to change that to say, whether you're a man or a woman, pain is pain. If you need to cry, if you need to mourn the loss of a loved one, by all means, you should be able to do that. Society must allow you to be able to do that. And then maybe if we can just kind of revisit the terminology. We've been talking about these issues since last week. We've looked at what are the definitions of gender and the gender roles and the stereotypes within our communities. And when you look at that, you then see that the gender roles actually feed off from the stereotypes that we have in our communities, because this is what we've defined as this is what women do, this is what men do. There are generalizations, of course, globally, where you can say women are generally subservient to men, but you also notice that there are cultural differences between perhaps the North and South with the roles of men and women, even at household level. You notice in our context, because maybe it's driven from the workplace context, you find that in our part of the world, for example, we give maternity leave for women to be at home to take care of their baby if they've just had a birth. And not so many countries in our region have been giving the paternity leave, for example. So the caring role has sort of been relegated to women. But if you look at countries in the North, for example, you then find that maybe countries such as Sweden and others have both the paternity leave and maternity leave. So then the roles of caring for an infant or caring for a child in the home, cooking, preparing meals, changing the diaper, it doesn't necessarily fall just on the women, but also the men are also given time to go and be at home and also support their spouse with those kind of roles. So those are the differences that show you that these things can be translated from one community to another. It's up to us really to define what we mean by being a woman in this society or being a man in another different society. And what we need to interrogate is, are people interested? Is there genuine interest to make changes to the current outlook of the translation of gender in our communities, and what would that look like? And then I always feel when I'm speaking or in platforms like this, we cannot go away without discussing or including what the toxic masculinities have done to the era of HIV and AIDS, because our region was the epicenter really of the epidemic. And you find that when women fail to negotiate for safe sex, and they cannot negotiate for condom use within their relationships because of the power dynamics in their relationships, you find that this is what has also fueled HIV in the past 2 decades in this region. So these are some of the issues that we need to also keep at the back of our mind, that when we continue to propel these gender stereotypes, there are also other non-intended impacts of these gender inequalities that we begin to see in our communities. And part of that has been the disproportionate impact of HIV on women. And those are some of the things that we want to address. So when we start to look at gender transformation norms, we want to look at how can we bring equality between the genders, where we have the freedoms of both men and women contributing to their fullest capacities in whatever sphere that they are working in, without any prejudices based on whether they are a man or a woman. We are also saying it's time we look at equity. It's not just about equality. What is the fairness of treatment for men and women according to their respective needs? As we know that equity eventually leads to equality. And we look at the norms to say, what is it that we can do to start changing and giving consideration to changing the gender norms within our communities? And at the backdrop of all this is that our society is largely informed by our gender norms that are visible currently are largely informed by the patriarchal society in which most of us have been raised, which have generally seen men as being superior to women, and in which men have more power, whether it's socially, economic, political, or even household power. So
Edith,
looking at the
I'm
gender.
just a bit mindful of time. If you can maybe just wrap up in a few brief words, that we can also get the panel involved and also get our participants to respond. Thank you.
Okay, so when we look at transformation, I think I'll just say this very quickly, that what we want to look at is gender transformative approaches aspires to change the current realities and help us to tackle the root causes of the gender inequalities and to reshape the power dynamics that we see in our communities. And part of how we can begin to do that is that we need to have an understanding of how gender norms influence us, especially at a very young age. How do they influence children, and to sort of adopt a life cycle approach from birth to middle age and then to adulthood. What is it that we can do at each stage of development and growth to make some changes? We also need to deliberately strengthen girls and young women's agency over the decisions that affect them, as well as to build their knowledge, confidence, skills, and access to control of resources, as well as access to educational opportunities. For us to also have a truly transformative approach, we need to work with and support boys. Craig has already spoken so much about this, that if we do not take on approaches that address boys and that address men, we won't really achieve much. So we need to work together with men and boys to make any changes, and for them to be able to embrace positive masculinities and have that translating into their day-to-day lives. We also need to look at how we can consider girls, boys, young men and young women, and appreciate diversity at all levels. And then we want to be able to improve the conditions and most importantly, to focus our work on improving the social position as well as the values and status of girls and young women, and then to ensure that we have these sustainable outcomes. So these are the things that we need to do. And as we implement the gender transformative approaches, I just want to mention that as we do this, it's important for us to remain mindful of the human rights-based approach. We also need to rethink the issues to do with power, the norms and values, consider also gender and diversity and empowerment of women and girls. And we need to continue to engage men and boys. And then there's so much that we can do in that space. And I'll just leave you with this last slide, which looks at what we can do at the behavioral level and the structural levels to address the current inequalities and move towards transformation. I will stop there, Lizette, for now.
Thank you, Edith. It was your knowledge is so powerful, and thank you for sharing that in such a confined, conduced. I know you have a lot more to offer. We will move to our wonderful panelists now. We already read Mr. Leon Root's bio. He will be one, and Pastor Juanita Kapp will be another one. I'm just briefly sharing this about Juanita, and you were introduced to her earlier on. She's an ordained minister of the Full Gospel Church. She has a full-time ministry for 14 years. She is the CPSC Level 5 religious professional. Juanita holds a master's degree in theology, dogmatics at the University of Northwest. In 2017, she was awarded at the University of Northwest the Lentjie de Lange Trophy for Best Ethics Student by the Faculty of Theology. She's currently serving as the Vice President of Golden Key International Honor Society Alumni Committee in the Eastern Cape. Her hobbies is doing karate, martial arts, singing, songwriting, and doing research. Her passion is to help individuals achieve their goals, and she loves being involved in community of uplifting. But most of all, her motto is never give up. So over to you and to Leon, if you want to start the discussion by asking the presenters, both Edith and Craig, questions. Leon, if we can start with you.
Thank you so much, Lizette, and thank you to Craig and Edith. I think you did it so well by putting the two sides of a coin together. We don't always hear this, that the two sides must talk to each other. But I just want to also reiterate something that I put in the chat, that we need to look at the history of Africa around gender more in depth, to fully understand how did it shape our gender understanding as it is today. Because gender by its notion was actually a fluid concept pre-colonial spaces. And that at that spaces, if you look at languages, across languages, there were not clear distinction between men and women as we have now. So many of these notions has been shaped by these kind of histories of colonialism, oppression, and other forms of oppression and dehumanization. And that plays out in the power relationships that are now at play. And I think we need to be much more critical, because look at the absence of the histories of the queens of Africa. We don't see it in literature. We don't see it in the history books. We don't see it in conversations like this, that we talk about the queens and how was Africa governed mostly by queens, even in the 14th and 15th century. And so I think we need to really go deep while we try to understand what's happening today. So on that, I think to ask Craig, when we look at masculinity, obviously the big thing is also to look at how do men within themselves, on the one hand, celebrate this kind of toxic masculinity, but on the other hand, oppress the other masculinities that we call the hegemonic masculinities. And that means that in many spaces, the man that thinks alike that you propose in your virtues are often still in spaces of oppression that they cannot truly live it out because that culture is still oppressing them. And to Edith, I think the question is also raised, how can women contribute to also help men to actually step out of this kind of traditional role and to become an equal partner in this space, that we can try to really get this as an equal space to find solutions beyond the genders that we like to categorize as only two, although there's so many genders now. Thank you.
Thanks, Leon. That's I think let me respond by using the metaphor of the human body. All of us in our bodies have bacteria and we have potential cancer cells, but the extent to which they are allowed to thrive depends on the health of the healthy cells. So for instance, a doctor deals with cancer by giving the whole body radiation or chemotherapy. And what that does is it actually attacks the entire body. Hair falls out, people get emaciated, they get nauseous, and the hope is that the cancer will die before the host. And we're doing the same with masculinity. We're attacking the entire masculinity in the hope that toxic masculinity will die. And all that happens is that the entire masculinity gets unhealthy and toxic masculinity thrives. What we need more in society is not less masculinity or weaker masculinity. We need stronger and more masculinity. Because when you have healthy masculinity, which says, I'm going to use my strength to love and to serve and to honor and to protect, what happens is unhealthy masculinity doesn't survive in that environment. If you have a boardroom where men are healthy men, let's say it's a boardroom full of men, traditionally there was a glass ceiling, but if that boardroom has got healthy men in it, and someone suggests that they hire another man who's not as qualified as a woman, the healthy masculinity in that boardroom says, no, we want the best candidate. It squashes the unhealthy masculinity. So the more healthy, positive, strong men we have in society who realize that their strength and whatever power they have or whatever structural power there is there as a sacred privilege to serve humanity, not just serve masculinity, not to dominate. The more what happens is the healthy masculinity begins to wipe out the unhealthy masculinity. You see, the problem is when we attack masculinity per se, what happens is we get weak masculinity, we get silent masculinity, we get resentful masculinity, and that leads to more toxicity. So we need to encourage and empower and equip and mobilize and inspire positive masculinity, because that will kill toxic masculinity and out of our structures, out of our systems, out of our society. So I think that's the solution.
Thank you, Craig. Edith, I don't know if you want to respond to that. I think we can move over to Pastor Juanita Kapp for her 2 questions.
Thank you very much, panel. Thank you, presenters, for your awesome presentations. We really enjoyed it. I want to ask Craig. Craig, you mentioned very interestingly, and I agree with you completely, that iron sharpens iron. Men sharpen each other and they give good qualities over to each other through validation, honoring each other, brotherhood, and accountability to each other. My question is, in the ministry, I've noticed that the same is also true in the negative sense. And I always tell the young adults that we work with and the youngsters and the youth that negative influences also, I always use the phrase, it rubs off. You mentioned pornography, you mentioned overworking, and if we look at gender-based violence in the sense of married couples, and the perpetrators and the victims, when overworking and pornography becomes a problem, they slip into that dark place. How do we curb this? What are the warning signs? How do we notice the problem before it starts? Because I remember Teresa mentioned in session 3, we kind of gloss over certain things. So we're giving people bulletproof vests, but the gun and the bullet is still there. And she mentioned that we should be taking away the bullet instead of giving them better bulletproof vests, what are the warning signs and how do we curb this? What can we instill? What can we put into place to assist these men to not go into that dark place? Thank you. That's my question to Craig.
Deep questions that require an hour to answer. But look, leadership is absolutely key, isn't it? Leadership is 100% key. So is fatherhood. You see, as I said earlier, young boys look to older men to model what it means to be a man. In the absence of fathers, there's no one to look to. So what do? They look to their peers. You know, there's a beautiful story, profound story from nature, where in the early 1990s, conservationists moved a whole bunch of elephants from the Kruger Park to the Pilanesberg Park because the elephant population was getting too big in the Kruger. But because of logistics, they moved younger elephants, not the bigger, older ones. And everything was fine for a short while, but the male elephants started behaving terribly. They started trying to mate with rhinos. A couple of rhinos were killed in the process. They started charging tourists. And conservationists were very confused because elephants don't normally behave like that. The only solution they found was they went back to the Kruger. They got 2 big bull male fully grown elephants, transported those to the Pilanesberg, and within weeks, the behavior of the young male elephants had completely transformed. They even found that the testosterone levels, the musk levels in the younger males, reduced in the presence of the older males. So the solution to positive masculinity or toxic masculinity is to develop leadership, restore fatherhood. Fatherhood is absolutely crucial. Good fathers. So work very heavily on fatherhood, on leadership, on masculine leadership, because that trains and teaches younger, you know, when an older bull is there, big bull elephant, the younger bulls behave themselves, as long as the bull elephant's behaving himself, because if he's misbehaving, it becomes a cycle. So we need to, in our current generation, break the cycle of fatherlessness, of split families, of, you know, which is caused a lot by our history, you know, migrant labors, et cetera, et cetera. We need to work very hard at restoring fatherhood and good male role models and mentors, because that will curb it. You see, if a young boy tells a racist joke in the presence of an older man, and the older man allows it to happen, you know what, it continues, and he gets affirmation. The older guy needs to say, hey, we don't do that here, that's not okay. He learns, he won't do it again. You need, so we need to restore those things to society. Easier said than done, but that is the solution.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Craig. Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. My question to Edith, first as a statement, I love the fact that you spoke about stereotyping, and let me just comment. I love the comment about where's the gravy. I don't know who posted that, but that was lovely. But the problem is with stereotyping, Edith, I agree, is that the children grow up in the home, and that is what they know. That is what they learn, like many of the speakers have said before. I perceive stereotyping to be very cold and restricting. If we can liken it to an ice tray, you know, those blocks of ice, if you try to get it out, it's often difficult. And stereotyping is like that to me in society, because women are taught they are able to do this and men have to do this. And if we have to reference back to the Bible, we can see that God says he's the potter and we are the clay. So that means we can be shaped, we can be transformed, we can blend, we can better each other, we can respect each other. So stereotyping is a very big problem, absolutely yes. Would you agree that in the new normal, we have all had to adapt? We have all had to shape kind of with the way that society is now changed. Everything is different from what we knew just before or prior to the COVID last year. I mean, it's only been a year and a few months. Would you agree, Edith, that if we could in principle adapt to the new normal, to the new structures, to the new rules, would you agree, what is your opinion, that we can apply the same principles of adaptability to stereotyping to instill new values? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Juanita. Exactly, that's just the point. Human beings are dynamic and we are in constant change. And because of that, we should also be able to adapt and change. This is going to take a whole generation making these changes. And I think we need to adopt a life cycle approach, which is fostered from family level into our communities, institutions, and societies. So you can imagine if we would have communities that have gone through the gender transformation sessions, whether it's the gender dialogues with Craig or through their faith-based organizations or through the workplace. And if each and every one of those individuals would go back to their families and start to raise their children differently, even with the choice of toys that we buy children, desist from saying the boy child can't play with a Barbie doll, or the girl child can't get a fire engine, or the boy child must pursue the sciences in education. If we also started to encourage young girls to enjoy life and to experience life differently from what was previously pushed based on the stereotypes that are existing, you would see that we would start to get a different picture. If the boy child also started getting engaged in the household chores, if the boy child was also cooking, cleaning, helping with the laundry and all that, and if the girls would also go out and help with milking of the cows and farming the land, and have that division of labor, which is not, say, this job is for women or this must be done by men. And I think that's what we need to do, to take a life cycle approach and see what is it that we can do at every stage to kind of foster and promote responsible gender behaviors for both men and women.
Fantastic, thank you. Just to tie the two together, Craig and Edith, I think what came to the fore now is, yes, we can put systems in place. It's going to take a while, but we must lead by our example. So thank you very much for those answers, presenters. I appreciate them.
Thank you, Juanita. Thank you, Leon, and thank you to excellent two presenters. As we opening the floor also for any questions from the floor, I like the concept that change starts with me. What is the one thing that you were triggered by today with Craig and Edith and the conversations we had with our panelists that you will do differently as a result of the awareness of gender roles and the influence of socializations in the process? If you can just paste it in our chat box, what is the one thing that you take from here that you will do differently? Might be a toy that you buy your child, it might be a conversation that you have with a colleague, it might be introducing it at your place of work or worship, that there is a discussion. It all is in your power and influence. And we all have that space where we do have power and we do have influence. So if you can just maybe post that as an interesting thing, or maybe think about it and post it if you join us in our next seminar. Is there any questions from the floor that you want to ask either the panelists or the presenters? Anything comes to mind? With that, then I will maybe ask you, Anita, to do the closure for us for today. Maybe just one or two takeaways, and then also maybe Leon, just one or two takeaways, as you are also the key partners in the process. We did work with Edith. She was a presenter as well as Craig, but maybe from your side, and Natasha and Leon, if you want to say something in closing.
Leon, you may go first. Thank you, Lizette.
Yeah, I think you captured it very well, Lizette. There were some interesting questions in the Q&A that people asked, for instance, the importance of language that actually shapes gender identity. And I think this is so important because in a lot of African languages, there is actually no gender differentiation. And that makes us aware that, again, as I reiterated before, that, you know, we must look at the histories of how did it shape our understanding of gender, and not only look from a global perspective. We need to localize it. We need to bring it to our communities and down to our own platforms. Each one of us sitting here has a history of gender and how it plays out, how we see ourselves and express ourselves, and even how we love the other. And that means that we have to come into time to tell stories. It's time to tell our life stories, our stories of healing, our stories of connecting and finding each other. And that is, for me, the most important part, listening to the two sides of a coin and to listen to the presenters. It is much more than a theoretical exercise. It is a personal exercise, as you said. It starts with you, but it starts with you telling your story so that we can hear it and we can connect with each other and find each other, and together we will find the solutions. But if we stay apart and we keep our stories to ourselves, nothing can actually happen. And I encourage each one of you, please tell your story. Don't die and never told your story. That will be the most heartbreaking part of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. I appreciate that comment so much. Yes, that is why we are doing this. That is why we are conducting this webinar series, Victims, to reach out to you, to give you a voice, to give the audience a voice. I was thinking as the comments were streaming in the chat function, when Edith asked us to imagine what we would say if we were a man or a woman, I thought it's so easy for us to refer back to our childhood and think, what would my mom probably have done? What would my dad probably have done? But should we now look at a gender equal society, would it be as easy for you to also give the same answer? What would the differences be? I think we should look into that before our next session to say, what does a society look like where the genders are equal? That's why I love when we do karate and martial arts, everything we do on the one side, we do on the other side. And I think we can bring that balance through awareness in society. We can bring that balance to our boys and our girls to let them realize they are all special. They are all validated. They are all needed in society. Everyone has a place. And I refer back to that birthright. We have different functions, but every single person created has a birthright. There is something that you are placed to do. So I have a lovely question here from Mubin Dantu. I hope I said your name correctly. They asked, how do you apply these terms and concepts discussed in the webinar to non-binary individuals, such that masculine and feminine representation can assist non-binary individuals behave in a positive way and steer away from the GBV climate? In 2 minutes, please, Craig, and then Edith, can you just answer that question? How do we apply these terms and concepts to non-binary individuals so that the masculine and feminine representation can assist non-binary individuals to behave in a positive way and steer away from the GBV climate? After the answers, I will be closing the session for us. Thank you, Craig, if you'll answer first.
I think we need to go back to a serious emphasis on humanity, that we are primarily human beings before male and female, before anything else. But I also think it's very dangerous if we start saying that equality equals sameness. There is a difference between men and women, no doubt. I mean, if we need to mandate and create a society in which there's equal opportunity for all, but we must never mandate equal outcomes. And I'll give you an example. You take bricklaying as a profession. If you had to ask 100 men and 100 women, do you want to be a bricklayer? Far more men would want to be bricklayers than women. And that's fine. So we need to create a society in which every woman has the opportunity to be a bricklayer if she wants, but we mustn't force 50% of bricklayers to be women and 50% to be men. That would be crazy. Women do tend more towards the nurturing and caring sciences and professions, like medicine, than men. There are more doctors that are female graduated now than men. Men do tend towards more the engineering, mechanical. We mustn't say that half of all mechanical engineers must be women and half men. We mustn't say half of all doctors. We mustn't do that. We must create a society in which there is equal opportunity for both. There's a difference between forcing an outcome and allowing an opportunity for everyone to be themselves. We are different, and it's beautiful, the difference. Women physiologically and biologically nurture life, give birth to life, and then sustain that life. Men physiologically and biologically plant the seed and then, you know, play a role as a father. And then that difference is beautiful, and we mustn't eliminate that difference in creating a society which is equal opportunity for all and equal value for every human being. So this is a complicated discussion. We must be careful not to steer in the other direction, as opposed to steering where we designed to go.
Absolutely, well said. Yes.
Yeah, Anita, you know, it's such a powerful input from Mobeen that I think this topic warrants a special discussion, that we will delve in it in our future
Absolutely.
conversation, because it has its own focus within the accepted gender roles, and we need to make sure that we don't
answer that
this opportunity
absolutely
for this discussion.
Absolutely, I agree with you, Lizette, and I agree with Craig. I think it all comes down to the freedom to choose. Absolutely, and to have that choice. Edith, would you in 2 minutes just like to answer that question before I close?
I would say it's about protection and inclusivity for all. And whatever programs that we implement, they must be gender neutral. And in fact, when you look at the whole dilemma or the difficulty of addressing these issues for the sexual minority groups, for example, you find it's because of the understanding and translation of the gender stereotypes within our communities. That's what has resulted in the problems that we see today, because societies have said men behave like this, women behave like this is what men should do, and this is what women should do. And we have forgotten the fluidity, that sometimes some individuals are different, and we are not embracing diversity. So once we have these gender transformation norms, the community dialogues, or the change in addressing these issues from a very young age, you then find that people will become more accommodative and more understanding and appreciative of diversity. And over time, this will even cease to be a problem, whether you're a sexual minority or which gender you identify as.
Absolutely, absolutely, Edith. I think what comes to the fore here is that as men and women, we differ. We have different roles, but we have the freedom to choose. So we should never forget our primary roles, but we should have the opportunity to be more than we can be, or more than stereotyping often says we can be. So that is very important for us to stay grounded, who we are primarily, but to know that we have the opportunity, should we want to be more than what we want to be, it is open for us. Lizette, I agree with you. We will delve into those topics absolutely as the series moves along. I would like to thank all the collaborative partners, all the presenters, the panelists, and our MC Lizette Leroux for today. We learned so much, and this is only the start of our journey. Our next session will be on Monday. So please look at the program that we've been sending on social media with all the links. That is Monday, the 13th of September at 1 p.m. again. And I just want to give you the topic for Monday. It's manhood, masculinities, and gender-based violence. So please join us. Prof. Nokutula will then be back with us as well. From the Golden Key Southern Africa head office, we'd just like to thank you for joining us in this session. Thank you for enjoying it with us. Thank you for your insights and your valuable presentations. We will see you in the next webinar series. And please, if there are questions that you have, please have them ready for us on Monday on the topics that we are presenting. So have a lovely week, everyone. Stay safe, and we will see you Monday, 13 September at 1 p.m. You may now leave this session by clicking the leave button at the right bottom of your screen. Thank you, everyone.